Okay, class, in this video, we're going to set up a DFS server. A DFS server is basically a file server with redundancy. So the first thing I'm going to do is assign all my IP addresses. So I'm going to pull up my diagram. I've updated my diagram. DFS R1, root 1 will have 0.8. Root 2 will have 0.9. Share 1, S1, will have 0.10. And share 2 will have 0.11. R1 and R2 are just going to hold links to the file shares. So the shared data will be on these two servers. These will just be links. So I'm going to have multiple links on these servers. So when you click on one link, it'll take you to one of the two file servers. The file servers will have the same data. So when you save a file to S1, it'll automatically replicate it to S2. So when you click on the link, it's going to take you to one of the two file servers. You don't know which one it's going to take you to. So if one of these file servers goes down, the other file server will be still up and running. So we're trying to create a highly available file server. So the first thing I'm going to do is start assigning my IP addresses. Actually, I'm just going to do it in PowerShell. There's my 3 commands. Pause the video if you need to right here. When I hit enter, it's going to reboot. It's going to rename and join it to the domain at the same time. Now I'm going to go to R2. Guys, if you look at this command versus the command on the last computer, it's slightly different. I don't know why it takes either syntax, either credentials or domain credentials, but it works. So I'm just kind of showing you that there's multiple ways to run the command. In 2019, this command sometimes won't rename. I don't know why. Some of you might have gotten the error, others might not have. It worked fine in 2016. I'm just going to go back to R1 and sign in. Again, make sure you sign in as a domain admin. The changes we're going to make are going to affect the domain, so a local admin won't have the rights. So I'm going to go to S2 and configure the IP addresses. See, it failed again to join. It failed again to rename, but it did join. I'm going to check out DFS R1, DFS R2, and DFS S1. I'm going to go to the last machine, S2, and configure the IP address. I think this might work. See, if you go run the show command and you do the new net IP, you can just kind of fill in the blanks. So we can do Ethernet. So you have this graphic utility. I guess that some people might find it useful. See, it fills in the command for you. So show command set DNS client. Let's see if it'll accept an asterisk here. I've never used this before. Another student showed it to me. Yeah, it works. So show command add computer. Credentials is that's interesting. I don't know what to put here. Let's see if this will work. I think I should have checked restart. Okay, so now all four machines are joined to the domain and have their IP set. I'm just waiting for S2 to reboot. I'm going to pause the video to help a student with the lab. Okay, I'm back. So all four machines are joined to the domain. renamed, have their IP set. So I'm going to go to DFS R1, and I'm going to, in this lab, show you how to configure all the machines from this one server. So I'm going to throw in something else in this lab. So I'm going to go to Manage, Add Servers. Since I don't have too many servers, I'm just going to do Find Now. I'm going to take all 4 DFS servers and add them to this one console. So now that they're added, if I go to all servers, I can see I have all 4 servers I can manage from this one console. Now I'm going to create a server group called DFS servers and add all 4. I'm highlighting them, clicking this middle button. Now I have this one entry over here on the side that I can click on and see all the events for those 4 servers. I could do things right here, like open up a remote PowerShell to that server or computer management. So I'm going to right click here on DFS R1. I'm going to add roles and features. It automatically selected DFS R1. I'm going to install file servers, DFS namespace, and the tools to manage it, and DFS replication to DFS R1. Next, next, restart if needed. On DFS R1 and R2, I'm going to be creating links, and that's going to handle my namespace. Those are the links. And when I create a link here, I want it to replicate it over here. So I need to install both DFS namespace and DFS replication. DFS namespace to hold my links and replication to replicate the links from one server to the other. So I'm going to close this, let it do its thing. I'm going to right click on the second server, add roles and features. It's automatically selected R2. This is going to be a namespace server, and I need to replicate those links. Restart if needed. Close that out. So I'm going to move to the S1. I'm going to right click, add roles and features. It's automatically selected S1. On this machine, it's going to be a file server, but I only need DFS replication. I don't need namespace because this isn't going to hold the actual links. This is going to hold the actual data. So I just need to be able to replicate data from S1 and S2. S1 and S2 are going to be my actual file servers. R1 and R2 will only hold links, no data. S1 and S2 will hold actual data. Restart if necessary. I'm going to close it and go to S2 and do the same thing. It's automatically selected S2, and I'm going to install DFS replication and the tools to manage it. Restart if necessary. And I can go to my notification flag and see the status of my installations. Okay, it's done being installed on all 4 machines. So now I'm going to go to Tools, DFS Management. I'm going to go to Namespaces, right click and create a new namespace. So I need to specify my namespace servers. R1 and R2 are going to be my namespace servers. So I'm going to specify R1 first. DFS R1. Click Next. And I'm going to call it public. You don't really need to mess with the permissions here because by default, everyone has read access to this, what we're creating right now. We're actually creating a shared folder called DFS root, and it's only going to hold links. No one needs to have change permission to the links. It's not going to hold any actual user data, just links to the file servers that actually hold the data. Okay, so we're going to create a domain-based DFS root or namespace. So basically, if you were standalone, you wouldn't have the ability to replicate between 2 namespace servers. Standalone, you don't have redundancy. You just can take multiple file servers and put them under one single shared drive. If any of you have ever been to an organization where they have the D drive, the E drive, the F drive, and it just becomes a nightmare when all these users have multiple drive letters for network shares. If you set up DFS standalone namespace, it puts all those shares under one shared drive letter. And at that point, your users can just click on that one drive letter. If you have multiple drive letters, it might become a support nightmare if the end user changes it. An application depends on that drive letter, or they put it into the thumb drive and it changes their drive letters. So it makes it a lot easier to manage one drive letter that can point to multiple file servers, but there's no redundancy. Now, a domain base does the same exact thing, but allows you to replicate data to multiple servers. So I can have 2 servers hosting the namespace, and I can have multiple servers, I think up to 32, hosting the shared data. So when they click on a link, at that point, it's going to take them to one of, however many file servers that all hold the same data. And when you make a change to one, it'll replicate that change to all others. So I'm going to create my namespace. So my namespace is // public, and people can get to that share by going to that URL, or I can map it to a drive letter, and I'll show you that later. So if this server goes down, people won't be able to get to any of my files, any of their files. So what I'm going to do is have 2 servers host that name. So I'm going to go to namespace server and add a second server. And this time it's going to be called DFS R2. Again, it needs only to be read-only data because it just holds links, no actual user data. All user data will be saved on the file share. Now, if you get an error at this point, adding a namespace server, that means you didn't install DFS namespace on R1 or R2, depending on which machine you're on. Okay, so I'm just going to go to that location, contoso.com public. So it took me to either R1 or R2. I don't know which one it connected me to. Because they're both hosting that name. So your end users, it's a little bit of a security because they don't know the actual server name they're connecting to. So they're connecting to one of these two servers. Okay, so let's go in and create a folder. This is really a link. So I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to call this profiles. So when they click on that profiles folder, I need to take them to either a share on S1 or a share on S2. So I'm going to say, this example is wrong. Do not follow their example. DFS S1 profiles. So if they click on that profiles link, it could take them to this server or to S2, which I haven't done yet. So I'm providing the network or the SMB path to that share. So I'm going to click OK. It's going to give me a warning that it doesn't exist. That's fine. Now, that was the network path. Now I need to supply the local path. I'm going to put everything under shares. I'm going to put all my shared folders under shares. Shares isn't shared. The folders underneath it are. So in this particular case, profiles will be shared. Shares is just where I store all my shares. I'm going to customize the permission. These are the old school permissions that I don't want to use anymore. So the most effective way to turn these off is give everyone full control. We're going to lock it down with NTFS permissions. We're not going to use these share permissions. Click OK. It's going to create the local folder, then share it as profiles. So I'm going to create a second target, meaning if they click on the profile shares, it'll either take them to DFS S1 profiles or DFS S2 profiles. Please be careful with typos. I like to put my SMB path as all lowercase. Click yes. And my NTFS or local path, I like to make it uppercase for the first letters. Customize the permission. Everyone get full control. We're not going to use shared permissions. We're going to use NTFS permissions. Yes, create the folder. Then click OK. And it's going to now ask me to set up replication between the two file shares. We don't have to set up the replication between the two namespace servers because it's automatic. Because the data is so small, it's just sharing link. But this data can be quite large, so they want to know how often do you want to replicate. So that's where it's going to store the replication data. Those are the two boxes it's going to replicate against, the two file shares. If you had one box that already had data, you would make that the primary. So it would copy everything from S1 to S2. If S1 had data and S2 didn't, and you chose S2 as the primary, it would take all the data in S1 and put it in a subfolder as a backup. In 2008, it would just erase it. So you need to make sure that your primary member is the server that actually has data. In our case, neither has data, so it doesn't matter. I only have two shares to replicate against, so I'm just going to go full mesh. I could, if I had like 5 shares that I'm replicating with each other, I could do it like a hub and spoke. Everyone replicates to one box. Sorry, my mouse disappeared on me. Everyone replicates to one box and everyone replicates from that one box. But I only have two, so it's a point-to-point replication. I could specify a certain bandwidth to use. Maybe I don't want to make sure that my DFS server doesn't use up all the bandwidth replicating data, and maybe I replicate only after hours. It depends on how quickly you need those files to each server. Then create, then close. So now if I go to this namespace, when I click on profiles, so I don't know which machine I'm going to right now to find this link. You see how it's not a normal folder? If I click on it, which machine is it taking me to? Is it taking me to the share on S1 or the share on S2? You don't know. Let me show you the link that it actually, where links are stored. So it created this folder when I did my namespace called DFS roots. And then there's my namespace folder. So if I go to the local path and try to click on the link, it's not going to take me. I have to go to this through the network path, which is contoso.com public, and then I can get to one of the two shares. So we're now going to create another folder. I'm going to call it redirect. I'm going to click add. And so one share will be S1 redirect. I'm going to customize the permissions to turn off share permissions. And the local path, again, will be under my C shares folder. And I'm going to call it redirect. So the redirect folder is the folder that's being shared. So I'm going to add another target. So when they click on redirect, it'll take them to either S1 or S2. The SMB path, I like to make all lowercase. And the NTFS or local path, I like to make the first letter uppercase. Because when you look at a local path, it's always, the first letter is always uppercase. So when they go to redirect, it'll take them to one of two file servers. Click OK. Then replicate between those two file servers. So essentially, the only thing you're going to change is who the primary is. In this case, it doesn't really matter because they're both blank. So if we go to that path, public, I have two folders. They can go to redirect or they can go to profiles. When I connect to the share, I don't know if I'm connecting to R1 or R2. It doesn't matter. If one's down, it'll take me to the other. And when I click on a link, it'll take me to S1 or S2. It doesn't matter. If one's down, it'll take me to the other. So now I'm going to go back to my server manager. I'm going to go to File and Storage Services. I'm going to go to Shares. So here are my namespace shares that just hold links, and there's the shares that just hold data. So not only will the replication handle the data, but it will also replicate the permissions. So I'm going to fix the permissions on this machine. The wizard to set up DFS only allows me to fix the share permissions. It doesn't allow me to set the NTFS permissions. So that's what we're going to do now. So I'm going to right click, go to properties, under permissions, I'm going to customize the permissions. So right now, they allow you to, the users, the local users group, anyone in that group is allowed to modify this. So what we're going to do is just control it so only domain users can make changes to this. So I remove the two local user groups, and then I'm going to add, I'm going to type domain users and give them modify access. So domain users will be able to make changes. You don't want to give domain users full control, because if you do, they'll be able to change permissions. By giving them modifier rights, they'll be able to add files and folders and make changes, but they won't be able to change permissions. So I'm going to click OK. Click OK again. So when I change it here, that eventually is going to get replicated to down here. So those NTFS permissions. So I'm going to do the same for redirect. Go to properties, go to permissions, customize permissions. Here's my NTFS permissions. Here's my share permissions, which we already fixed. So I'm going to go to permissions, remove the two local user permissions. That's a local users group. And I want to add, so only domain users can modify. These permissions right here will have no effect whatsoever because everyone has full. That's the permissions. If I give it a little bit of time, it will replicate down to here. It hasn't done it yet. Okay, guys, again, this is going to be broken up into multiple videos, so I'm going to stop right here for this video. Thank you.